So, English is a mess, right? I think we can all agree on that. But if you think English is a mess, just wait till you see my very first conlang. This will be painful. But first, I probably ought to tell you what this video is. There are going to be two parts, a history part and the actual conlanging part. The conlanging part starts around the time I start addressing and fixing the orthography. Due to the nature of my editing, I have no clue when that will be, so I'll put a note on screen if I remember, telling you where the serious conlanging actually begins. Anyway, there's some good news and some bad news regarding the documentation of this language. The bad news is that most of it has since been lost. The good news is that most of it has since been lost. I managed to find a total of 3 sheets of paper to go off of, plus my memory, which is usually pretty good. Anyway, my idea of a conlang in 2012 was a spelling reform of English. You'd think I might come up with something somewhat logical, say something that looks like this. But no, I went off my knowledge of kindergarten phonics and divided vowels into short and long. No, not these, but these. This was my understanding of how vowels worked, so I made single vowels represent the sounds in the short column and double vowels represent the sounds in the long column. Not off to a great start, are we? It gets worse. I made a number of orthographical changes to English that were not only unnecessary, but just downright stupid. I'll try to order them from least to most stupid. So first off, we have no silent vowels and no double consonants. This one actually makes sense, because if you're doing an English spelling reform, why keep the silent vowels? Next, I had the letter J represent what I wrote as the Y sound, but I didn't know IPA and was probably not aware that Y was a separate phoneme, so I'm sure I meant Y. Now, what to do with this sound? Well, we'll get there. Next, I disobeyed my double vowel rules and made the letter combination EI represent the sound in dinosaur. This one. That's not too horrible, I guess. The next one I did was a little worse. I made OU stand for the ow sound, probably getting it from about or something like that. Next, I split the letter C into 2 sounds, S and K, which is also pretty logical. What's not logical is that, to represent those sounds, I used the German scharfes S to represent S and a CH to represent K. Like, what was I thinking? Not only did I specify that scharfes S could only be used at the beginning of words, but it could represent the sh sound if followed by an H. Fortunately, this was interchangeable with SH. Wait, never mind, I changed that too, because Albanian had a little influence on my first conlang, if you can call it that, so XH and SH could be used interchangeably for the same sound. We're not even close to done. The next crimes against humanity were as follows. I totally cut W out of the equation and replaced the sound with V. Then I took a page out of the West Slavic book and made CZ stand for the ch sound, since for some reason I didn't want to use K for its intended purpose, and made CH stand in its place. I instructed the reader to always roll your R's, whatever that means, and then saw the word air, saw the AI making that weird sound at the beginning, and declared that AI would stand for whatever that sound is. I think this is the closest to my pronunciation. Regardless, the word error would now be spelled error. Anyway, that might just be the worst change I made if it wasn't for that pesky j sound. Do you know what logical choice I made for this? Here it is. I have no words for this. To top it all off, I created a new letter. Why? Because I wanted to, I guess. So, aside from all that, we have all proper nouns just being spelled like they are in English, because why not, and an apostrophe to separate the word and any suffix I tacked onto the end. So, this is the state of our language now. That was old and gross. Yeah, you can see that diacritics are about to be discovered. After performing these orthographical changes, because it seems that's all I cared about, I actually started branching out from English vocabulary, just a tad bit. Engros took a hard left towards German, and then the language became a bad German ripoff too. I made another series of bad orthographical changes before deciding to scrap the language, not because I thought it was bad, but because I was just getting bored with it, I guess. Somewhere in there, I replaced QT with something maybe even worse, the Hebrew letter het. Why? Don't ask me. I don't think even 2014 me would know. So, by the time this mess of a conlang was abandoned, there was a random Hebrew letter floating around amongst the diacritics. I can't even type that without my nice left-align format flipping out. The language certainly lived up to its name. It was gross. A couple years went by, and I must have found the old white binder with this gross language in it. Silly 2017 me looked at it and thought, wow, this sucks, and set out to fix it. And it was still bad. I called it Epilish, which is now the name of a culture on Keishas because I like how the name sounds. Anyway, it was an improvement over the original, but anything could be considered an improvement over the original. I standardized the orthography, which was still a mess, but not to the same degree. By this point, I definitely knew the IPA, or was at least getting familiar with it, which makes making this video much easier. I have one sentence from this area. Ki lis Epilish. I speak Epilish. So, we're getting somewhere, right? The only proper way to deal with a conlang this bad is to redo it in a way that's intentionally bad. Or at least, that was my mindset at the start of this, before I started liking where the language was going. 2012 Philo didn't know what he was doing. Maybe 2020 Philo doesn't either, but I like to think I've at least somewhat improved in the last 8 years, enough to be able to say that what I'm about to do is 100% intentional. There were many times when I thought that I should just scrap the whole idea because it's too much of a mess. ʻLɛçt took this philosophy with his first conlang, ʻthandian, and based on what he put in his video about it, he was right. But there's one big difference between me and ʻLɛçt, besides the fact that he's British and actually a good conlanger. He knew way more than I did when he made ʻthandian. 2012 me didn't know what verb conjugations or noun cases or adjective agreement were. I couldn't make Engros a hulking mess because I didn't have the knowledge to do so. So, I can redo it because there's not really a whole lot to redo. My idea of a conlang back then was 90% orthography. So let's do this thing. I think it's only right to address the orthography first. Here's a vowel chart with all the vowels in this reboot version of the language, carried over directly from the Epilish phase. We'll go ahead and get rid of this sound, and move this sound up to the schwa. My AI from =r used to stand for this sound, here, because I thought the nice German word Wasser was pronounced Wasser. Not quite, but wouldn't it be fun to leave AI in as the weirdest schwa ever? We'll just have it at the ends of words. Everywhere else it'll be umlaut e. And you can justify it by saying that at some point the I sound at the end of words just became a schwa. That's plausible. I distinctly remember using the letter J at the ends of words for the E sound. I think I see what I was going for, but it didn't quite work, so we'll just forget that ever happened. So, the E sound at the end of a word can be either a single or double I, which doesn't stand for it anymore because we won't be using that. It can be doubled because in the Epilish phase I seem to have randomly doubled a few of them, so why not carry that over? The needlessly complicated orthography is getting more complete by the second. Aside from the occasional double I, we'll just get rid of all the double vowels. We'll also get rid of circumflex U and replace it with umlaut O for the U sound, and this sound can go away too, so the single A can represent this sound. Umlaut A can be kept as the A sound, since that's almost what it's like in German, and this mess took inspiration from German. Plus, unless it's over an I, I'm always partial to an umlaut. All we have to do now is stop using U for the schwa and move it on over to U to take the place of its fallen double brother. With that, the vowels have been simplified and we're ready to move on. Let's tackle the consonants now. Fortunately, they aren't as much of a cluster as the vowels, but there are still some anomalies. As far as CZ goes, we can scrap that. If we want ch in this language, we'll just use good old C. If I didn't want to use it at all in Engros, I'm definitely using it here. Except sometimes it won't be C. Instead, it will be supplanted by HJ in some places. Why? I'll do you one better. Why not? Perhaps there was a vowel between them in some fictional predecessor of the language. As for sh, I'm inclined to stay with the vein of XH from the original Engros, so I'll cut it down to just X. Let's simplify that weird HV ligature to just a normal HV at the beginning of words, and just V everywhere else. Why? Historical spelling reasons. If French can do it, I can do it. It seems I reluctantly used a K in the late Engros phase, joined with an H for whatever reason. Let's rectify this. It's just K from now on. OU will be changed to AU for the sound OW, because that's just more logical. The rhotic system is a mess, of course, so we'll merge them all into a nice, familiar alveolar tap, represented by a single R. We'll drop S set in favor of S. We'll drop the schwa as a letter, since it's represented by the good logical choice AI, as well as umlaut E. And umlaut U can go away too, since U is represented by the plain U. There's one more thing I'm forgetting. Ah, right, the Hebrew letter. What to do? Ah, yes, I know. To top off this strange amalgamation of a language, we're going to honor that horrible aesthetic choice by replacing the Hebrew letter and the QT combination with the Russian letter P. Yes, it's stupid. It's also more aesthetic and fits better with the Latin script. It's easier to type, what with formatting and everything. And the letter P is closer to the letter Q than H is. That last one was a joke, but this whole video is a joke, so does it really matter? I'm kidding about using a Russian letter. I hope you haven't clicked off yet, because I'm just going to use a plain old J for the J sound. It makes sense since we put an H in front of the J for ch, right? And one last thing. N with a tilde for the ny sound, cedilla C for the sh sound, HU for the h sound, and ZJ for the j sound, because I really like all of those sounds. Finally, we need a name for this new phase of the language. I'll call it Sparai, after the word for stupid, to reflect the roots of this language. As far as grammar goes, let's start with the basics. Sparai has an SOV word order, no articles, no cases, two numbers, singular and plural, no genders, and agreement between nouns and verbs for number and person. Nouns are pretty straightforward, so let's go over verbs first. Every verb ends with a vowel followed by a K, R, or N, and that part is dropped when not in the infinitive form. So a regular K verb like ŝtijak would look like this, a regular R verb would look like this, and a regular N verb would look like this. Of course, this is all for regular verbs. There are some irregular verbs, 7 to be exact. Those are the following: to be, which is az, to have, which is mis, to speak, which is lis, to come, which is umri, to go, which is kish, to want, which is eli, and to make, which is cringe. If you're interested, go ahead and pause the video to screenshot these agreement tables. I'm not going to run through them, but here they are. Verbs can be put in simple past tense if they are first put in the equivalent of third-person singular conjugation, and then the suffix mat is appended to the end. For future tense, you can use the suffix ptak, dropping the k off the infinitive and keeping the vowel. We'll also give them a reflexive prefix if the need arises. You might be thinking, Philo, why put the verb in third-person singular just to make it past tense? Well, we're not really putting it in third-person singular. It's just the same ending. Long ago, it could have been something more like panzakmat, but that's hard to say, so over time the K fell off and we got panzamat. As for why we aren't using umlaut E here, I don't know. Maybe the old scribes made the connection with the conjugation pattern. Moving on now, pronouns are fairly straightforward. Since there is no grammatical case, pronouns only have one form for person and number. Adjectives and adverbs are both glued to their nouns to eliminate the need for agreement. In addition to these, for questions, there will be a particle at the beginning of a sentence introducing the question, and then the rest of the sentence is in normal SOV word order. There's also a negative prefix, ga, which can be put on nouns, verbs, whatever you like, to make the opposite of them. So, now I'm going to read you some sentences in this new Conlang, which I'm really starting to like. Ki malivukayat lenja. I read books a lot. Here we see ki for I, like I said, fairly straightforward. This object needs some unpacking. Mali means much or very, in this case modifying the word vukayat, which means books. I'd like to note that, if it weren't for the mali in front of it, vukayat would start with an H. Finally, the verb lenja is the first-person singular conjugation of lenjak, which means to read. And there we have it. Let's try another one. Mak durëtanujat lezak. You speak 2 languages. Here, the pronoun mak is present, meaning you. Like last time, we have a noun with an adjective on the front of it, dura, meaning 2. Tanuj is spada for language, and, of course, it gets a plural suffix. Now we deal with the verb again, and this one's irregular. Lis means to speak, but since it's irregular, we give it the second-person singular conjugation lezak. And we're done. Let's try one last sentence. Huan anjarai ʻsir mofaptak. When the light turns on, it will become very bright. Let's break this down by clause. First, we have Huan, which comes directly from the English word when. Lezt is similar in this regard, except it comes from the German word licht. Anjarai is interesting. On just means on, and jara is the third-person singular conjugation of jarik, the very versatile verb meaning to move. So literally, the light moves on, or unmoves, I suppose, because when constructions like this occur, the adposition is stuck at the front of the verb. If you want to say, I took the note down, you'd have to say, I down took the note, albeit in Sparai word order and grammar. Anyway, the second clause. Sir means both he and it, since there's no non-gendered third-person pronoun. It defaults to sir. Malihjälai is really 2 words. Mali, which we saw means very a couple sentences ago, and ʃe.lə, which simply means bright. Finally, the verb, a future tense become. The original word is mofan. That's right, to become is an end verb, but we don't get to see its conjugations in action because it's a future tense verb here. So sad. What is my reasoning for making this video, you may ask? If I want to lie to myself, I could say that it's to show that everyone makes mistakes and even the pros have to start from somewhere, though I do not in any way count myself among the pros. If I don't want to lie to myself, I'll say that this video, at least the first part of it, was a self-deprecating joke. Both are true in their own ways. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned from my mistakes, because there were many of them. If anyone is interested, I might start making a Learn Sparai video series to share this Conlang with you all, and it'd be cool if Jan Measley did a Conlang critic video on Sparai. I know that goal is a bit out there, but hey, I'm a dreamer. Let me know what you think of that down in the comments. Anyway, see you in the next one. ʻma.liʻt na spērat sein.